Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I am your host, Quianna Canada. Welcome to the Quianna Canada Show. Before we get into today's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember, your likes and shares are very important. What it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that videos like this are important. But we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm, that does not mean that videos like this are not important. Before, I am going to be getting into today's topic, but I do have an announcement. It's an announcement that I often give in my videos. And as you know, I am an activist that is currently undergoing transnational repression. Now, I bring this up in my videos every single day because I think it's important to bring awareness to this destructive practice. Essentially, transnational repression is where countries reach across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. Now, they can do it in a number of ways. The most common ways in which states silence dissent of their citizens abroad is hard tactics such as incommunicado detention, extraordinary renditions, enforced disappearances, and in the most extreme cases, unalivement. But there are some soft tactics, and those tactics include digital repression, proxy threats, and political repression, like extensive forms of coercive and covert oppression. And so it is very important for us to bring awareness to this and to give voice to students and human rights activists and journalists who are undergoing this practice. And I think what's unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen, is that what I have come to learn is that in some states, there is a cherry picking of who is an activist. There is a cherry picking of who is the ideal victim. And I think that that's quite unfortunate because this really puts the victim at risk of further abuse from the state. So that's why I think it's important for us to actually talk about this particular practice. Okay, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a human rights defender, I feel like it's an obligation of my own to bring stories to you that are touching upon international human rights instruments. And so, this story that I'm bringing to you is in the Republic of Ireland. And it's quite unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen. And so, before we get into this story, I want to issue a disclaimer that some of the content that I will be reading from is might be triggering for some. And if that is so, will link in the description of this video the contact number to Women's Aid. It's a 24-hour hotline where you can actually talk to experts about how you're feeling. If you are going through what is going to be discussed in this article, I hope that these services that are situated in the Republic of Ireland can assist you. I think that my lips feel dry, so just a moment. Yes. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Okay. Yes, so I will be linking that organization in the description of this video. Okay, let's go ahead and get into today's topic, ladies and gentlemen. So, the story that I'm going to be bringing to you, it's coming out of to reiterate, the Republic of Ireland, the story was written by Lauren Boland. This was published in the Journal. So the Journal is a reputable um, media site and that publishes news articles. And so we're going to go ahead and get into the article. So as you can see from the headline, uh, an owner of a property propositioned a student, an international student, and asked them for EX. And of course, you can understand how distressing that can be for a student, right? So let's go ahead and get into today's topic. A new survey says exorbitant rent costs, scams, and being expected to share space with a stranger are among the challenges faced by international students. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are some students that may feel uncomfortable sharing space with other people. I know that that is possible, probable, even, and it must be acknowledged that they have the right to feel that way. But on the other hand, not all students feel uncomfortable sharing a space with another student. And so I don't think the object of this publication is to paint all students with a broad brush. But I think what this paper is hitting on is really the exploitation of those in power and those who have the ability to rent to people in vulnerable situations or people who are foreign to a country. So let's go ahead and get into today's article. So 1 in 20 female students to a survey of international students said that they have experienced instances of leasers trying to extort EX in exchange for providing a bed. Exorbitant rent cost, scams, and being expected to share space with a stranger are among the challenges facing international students trying to find accommodation in the Republic of Ireland, according to a report published by the Irish Council for International Students. And so, additionally, let's see, quote, the owner who has a studio in the house asked after 5 days if I wanted to have X with him, said an Erasmus student from France. Quote, and so in this next part of the article, ladies and gentlemen, the student she shares her experiences, and she said like the accommodation that she was living in it was in disrepair. There were some serious issues with the upkeep of the accommodation, and she also said that the owner doesn't like to spend money to repair the accommodation. So that is quite disconcerting, I think. Let's go back to the article. And so the ICO surveyed 512 international students studying in the Republic of Ireland. Half of the respondents were studying at an English language school, 46% were in higher education, and 4% did not specify. More than half, 54%, agreed or strongly agreed that they were having these issues with their health in the Republic of Ireland, while 56% said that their student experience had suffered. And so, ladies and gentlemen, basically what is happening, what this article is talking about, is that this exploitation, and I don't think that the journalist goes deep enough in this article, but essentially what the article is saying is that when we are reviewing it or looking at it deeply, looking at these issues deeply, what the article is telling us is that in these situations where there is exploitation, where international students, whether you're from France, whether you're from Greece, etc., whether you're from Africa, whether you're from North America, if you come to a foreign country and you're on a visa, you're on a contract, and you are experiencing this kind of exploitation, it's very disconcerting, it's distressing, it it's difficult to contend with, and in some instances, it can call excuse me, it can cause a person to feel powerless, and I think that we could all agree that no one wants to ever feel that way. And so let's go ahead and continue with this article, ladies and gentlemen. Among those who are working while studying, 61% said half of their monthly salaries goes towards paying their rent. One in five who worked said they spend 70% of their income on rent. Three out of four English language students and a third of students studying in higher education, they share a room with at least one person. And okay, and so ladies and gentlemen, I think that this was like very interesting is that a female language excuse me, a female English language student from Brazil said, quote, "The least that a person expects when they arrive here is to have a decent place to sleep and privacy, but in the Republic of Ireland, she believes that that is not possible." Is this what a first world country looks like? And then, end quote. And basically, this female English student, or excuse me, this female student from Brazil, she says that her experience in the Republic of Ireland has been badly affected by the housing situation. A German Erasmus student said that they had to live in a car for 4 weeks because of the lack of accommodation available in the Republic of Ireland. The ISCOS is presenting its findings to politicians at Leinster House, and I guess that happened when this article was published. And in a statement, ICO's executive director Laura Harmon said the research, quote, exposes the alarming realities that international students in Ireland, so the Republic of Ireland, are struggling with to find safe, affordable, and minimum standard accommodation, end quote. Quote, to the extent of financial strain and overcrowding is deeply concerning, end quote. That is what Harmon said. Ladies and gentlemen, Harmon further stated, quote, urgent action is needed to address these issues, in particular, this EX for rent exploitation, to ensure that the Republic of Ireland remains a welcoming and supportive destination for international students, end quote. I'm deeply concerned by the contents of that article because I think that when students come to a nation such as the Republic of Ireland or any nation, right? uh, There's a lot that is happening. So, first, they are spending a lot of money for accommodation. Second, they're in a foreign country, and then in some cases, students, they don't speak the language. And so if they are being exploited or if they are experiencing intimidation or this exploitation is a form of intimidation that is if you don't do A, then you need to move out or this quid pro quo. I I'm deeply concerned by that because I think, to reiterate, that some people in these situations are very powerless, and sometimes there is not robust enough legislation to protect them. And so I think we should give space for those victims, and to give a moment of silence to think about, like, how this impacts them, because when you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, you have students that are studying, and so if you're in a university, it can be quite, you have a lot on your plate, right? So going to university, you're studying your modules, you have a lot to contend with, and so you have that, and then, unfortunately, in this situation with those students in the Republic of Ireland, with what is happening is that they are being faced with this kind of exploitation, and so I'm deeply concerned by that. But it must be acknowledged that the Republic of Ireland is a signatory and did ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. And I hope this shows up, ladies and gentlemen. The last time I published an article, it wasn't showing up, so I just need to check just a moment. Like, essentially what happened is when I went to the article, it didn't show. Okay, so it is showing, so that's great. Okay, so the articles that I really want to focus on here, ladies and gentlemen, is Article 2. And so Article 2 says state parties, they must condemn discrimination against women in all its forms. And so we can understand here, ladies and gentlemen, that exploitation, especially in these situations, are kind of like discrimination because this is happening to women, right? And women are being faced by this by men. So the convention says that state parties should agree to pursue by all appropriate means and without delay policy of eliminating discrimination against women, and to this end undertake a to embody the principles of the equality of men and women in their national constitutions or other appropriate legislation if not incorporated therein, and to ensure through law and other appropriate means the practical realization of this principle. And this is what I want to focus on here, ladies and gentlemen, to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices which constitutes discrimination against women. So in this particular situation, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that, in my personal opinion, that these rent schemes that seek to exploit women is can be looked at as a practice in a nation because there's a pattern of it happening to a group of people, right? There's a pattern in a practice. So I strongly feel that this practice should be eliminated. Let's go back to the convention. And I also want to focus on Article 6, ladies and gentlemen. Article 6, state parties shall take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to suppress all forms of traffic in women and exploitation. And so in some cases, I know that talks about like, you know, survival work for women, right? But to reiterate, in some cases, what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that some students will actually put out an ad for rent. This has happened. Now, I'm not alleging that this has happened in the Republic of Ireland, but this has surely happened in other nations. And so, I'm not putting the blame on one country. But what happens sometimes is that international students will put out an ad for rent, right? There or put out an advertisement or respond to an advertisement for rent. And once they get to uh, the country or get to this property, then the worst of the worst happens. And ladies and gentlemen, I talked to or not we talked about this in my business and human rights class today. So I want to kind of share that and I want to thank Dr. McVey because there is some principles that she brought up today, of course, in a few of the classes that I had with her that I think is going to undergird this live stream. And so in our class today, we talked about how some people come to foreign nations and I think when we were having this discussion, one of my cohorts brought this up is that when students or when migrant workers come into a foreign nation, often what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that they will get to a property or they will get to a an employment spot, and they will discover that they're essentially in an oppressive condition. So their passport is being taken from them, and so it's essentially being confiscated and held until the international student or the foreign national performs some kind of exploitative act or perform I guess, working in laborious conditions, and so sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, in these cases, which are very disconcerting, is that foreign students, international, of course, uh, are tied to contracts, and specifically if they are working for an employer, and that employer is attempting to exploit them or have already exploited them, it's really arduous to get out of situations like that. And so you can see how controversial this practice is because sometimes, and this is something that we brought up today in the class, is that sometimes there isn't robust legislation to protect foreign nationals and migrants in these conditions. And again, I want to reiterate that on this specific topic that I just mentioned, that I'm not pointing a finger at one specific country. I'm pretty sure this is happening in a number of countries, which of course is deeply disconcerting. But we must be mindful about this happening to women and how it makes women feel powerless. Now, in my business and human rights class, of course, Dr. McVey, she read an article about, so the article was from a scholar named Kimberle Crenshaw. And so basically, Crenshaw, she describes intersectionality as like, the intersection of what you would find in a street. And so in this case, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go into that in a minute, but I think in this case we have two intersections, right? So we have womanhood or female students, and then we have students that are not only female, but they are foreign nationals, so they're migrants. So you can see that those are two intersect. So you have the gender that's intersecting, and then you have like status that's intersecting, which in both cases, I guess innocents can be discriminated against and can suffer persecution or forms of intimidation and can also feel powerless. And how Crenshaw, like the way that she describes intersectionality is the intersection of a crossroads. So just say, for instance, I think the way that I understand this is that you have a person possibly in the middle of an intersection. And so you can see, like, okay, there's 4 lanes and a person is in the middle, right? And so if a crash happens, then that person is hit from all 4 lanes. And so one lane that they're hit, so in a sense, in the case at bar, is that one lane is gender, right? Because gender, female, a woman, that deals with gender. The second lane is the status as a marginalized person in the community, or one that can be perceived as marginalized if you are a migrant worker or if you are a foreign national and you're stuck in an exploitative contract. So that is also an intersection. Another intersection could be seen as if the person is, if this female student is a person of color, that is also an intersection, right? And so you have these intersections that are contributing to the person's, uh, I think, oppression. Well, it's contribute. Well, I think in this sense, what it's doing is when the person is oppressed, well, they're not only oppressed by being a woman, they're oppressed by being a migrant worker or an international student, and they're oppressed by being a migrant worker, a woman who is a person of color. So you have all these areas that I think, in life we understand that is uh, can be quite disconcerting for women and the international students and people of color who are experiencing discrimination, exploitation, and abuse. So that's kind of how I understand Kimberly Crenshaw's piece on intersectionality. And I think that it may tie into this article. And to reiterate, we have female students, so they are being asked to perform an act against their own violation by landlords that is, I think, I think innocence is considered harassment, right, of a sexual nature. And so that's one. And two, if they possibly complain about this, the landlord may have an upper hand because of this patriarchy, these patriarchal systems in society, and that may impact this female student as well. And if the student complains and they are a foreign national and they, or maybe they're a migrant worker, they may be afraid to complain. And so if they are afraid to complain about exploitation, then this kind of exploitation may continue. Thirdly, we have a female student who is a migrant worker or an international student, and she may be a person of color, right? And if she complains about this kind of exploitation, if we refer to Nile Christie's, the ideal victim, in certain circumstances, if she is a woman of color, she may not be seen as the ideal victim. And so if she's not seen as the ideal victim, then what is going to happen? She is going to be re-victimized, and that exploitation is going to continue. So you can see that this is deeply concerning to me. I hope that it is concerning to you as well. If you know anyone that is in a situation like this, I would urge you to speak out. I would urge you to give voice to anyone that wants to talk about this but feel that they can't because maybe confidentiality issues, or they feel like that this may be shared, of course, with other people. I want you, if you have it within you and you have the time and you can listen to these difficult stories, to give space for people who are sharing them. And I would also ask that you be an active bystander. And so oftentimes what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that when victims, especially those who are not perceived as the ideal victim, when they are being exploited or when they are suffering abuse, sometimes people around them won't speak out on their behalf. This is deeply troubling to me because, to reiterate, what it allows to happen is for that um, exploitation, harassment to continue, that discrimination to continue. And so I think that we need to be active bystanders and we need to speak out in a way that feels comfortable for us, whether that is slipping a letter to a person who has the authority to act on one's behalf, to do that, to talk to people you know and maybe ask around, and perhaps somebody you know can do something about it. And to be there for that person who is being exploited and abused, because so often, so many times, this happens to so many people. And in the worst cases, this leads to people taking their own lives. And this is something that we never want to see happen. So I think it's important for us to be active bystanders in the best way that we can, in the best way that we know how, and to always support victims of violence, abuse, and to speak out against exploitation. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that this was an informative video. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to this channel. I will possibly bring more videos like this should they come up. And if you haven't already, you can follow me on Facebook. I will link my Facebook account in the description of this video. Now, it's important to understand that like it's a very new account. I just created the account like within the last, I think, couple of months, a few months, and so it's a very new account. And I believe the account is being shadow banned in some capacity. Now it is appearing on the Google search results, but I believe that it is being shadow banned. So I don't think that my content is actually being shared to, uh, you know, the. I think the sharing capacity is very limited. Not many people are seeing my post, but that's what I see from my end. So it could be different on another end, but on my end, like it doesn't look to be much activity. So, if you want to, you can actually go ahead and visit my Facebook account and add me as a friend, and I'll friend you back. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to talk to you next time. Bye bye.